Man who's treated me most of the times pretty good. And I like him, and he's a smart guy, Hugh Hewitt.
I know exactly where it all went.
Welcome back, America. Dylan, Trump, and me, Hugh Hewitt, joined by Senator Tom Cotton. I'm not sure he'd say most of the time I treat him very nicely, and I'm sure he's not going to say I'm a smart guy. Good morning, Senator.
No, you treat me nicely all the time, but you're correct on the second. Why are you so mean? Why are you so mean to President Trump? You should be nice to him all the time.
Most of the time. Most of the time I am. Senator Cotton, I've got an article out at Fox News today, and I think it would be a good idea for the former president to name a list, like he did for Supreme Court appointees in 2016, sometime between now and before the convention, of his national security team potential. Not go job by job, but just put out the 15 people you can look for just to reassure national security conservatives and to put the world on notice that there's going to be a new sheriff in town. What do you think?
Well, Hugh, I'll let the president make that decision, whether it's his vice president or any potential cabinet officials or White House officials. That's really his call. I saw your column, and many of the people in there I respect tremendously, and I believe the president does as well, and they served him ably the first time around, people like Robert Lighthizer and Robert O'Brien and a handful of others. But I think ultimately that'll be the president's call.
Yeah, I just think it's good politics, because yesterday, on Monday in Politico, they found 18 former Trump officials, and 2 of them spoke on the record, John Bolton and Dan Coats. They're both mad at Trump. And 16 were anonymous about how they're going to appoint radicals to the national security. No, they're not. They're going to appoint people who are, pro-American, hard-nosed. They're not going to appoint radicals. They're going to appoint Reagan conservatives, don't you think?
I do, Hugh, and that's what President Trump was doing in his first term, especially by the end of his first term, when he had people that we both respect and that he still respects and whose counsel he still leans upon, like Robert Lighthizer, and Robert O'Brien, Mike Pompeo, and others. So, again, I think it's an unusual circumstance, obviously, that we've only had one other time in this country's history in which a candidate for president doesn't have to say what he will do or would do or might do, but can simply point to what he did. And that's a very compelling case for most Americans. Like, do you like things better now after 4 years of Joe Biden, or did you like them back when I was president?
Now, they're both going to the border on Thursday. President Trump to clap at what he did and Joe Biden to try and hide what he's done. I was alerted this weekend by some former Trump people to the fact that 40,000 military-aged Chinese males, Chinese nationals, have crossed our southern border in the last 15 months. 40,000. And they are released, sometimes with an ankle bracelet, sometimes with a note saying, please show up at X, Y, and Z. But we would never have let 40,000 Soviets into the country when I was in the government, Tom Cotton. What are we thinking?
Well, yeah, it's just the natural consequences of Joe Biden's open borders policy. Thousands of military-age men, not just from China, but from Russia and from other adversary nations and from God knows where. You saw one of those consequences just last week in Georgia with the brutal, depraved beating and murder of Laken Riley by an illegal alien. She would still be alive if he wasn't here, which he shouldn't have been, and he was here because of Joe Biden's failed policy.
That's true. There's no doubt about it that we get bad people coming across the border, and they're a significant percentage. They're not like 1 and 2. There's a significant percentage of bad people among the migrants. All of them are entering illegally. But I'm focused for a moment. If you were the Chinese Communist Party and you're at the Politburo and you're Xi, wouldn't you say, hey, shouldn't we try and get a bunch of our people into the country since that border's open? Wouldn't they do that?
Well, but you first, on that point, it doesn't matter if they are a tiny percentage. I mean, hell, when you've got millions of people coming in every year, 1/100th of 1% is a lot.
Exactly.
A lot of Americans. And again, unfortunately, if you're Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin, you look at America and you don't have to worry about smuggling your spies across our border. Like Joe Biden just lets them fly in and gives them visas to work in their embassies in Washington, D.C. or at the United Nations in New York or their consulates around the country. So I have no doubt that some of these folks coming in from places like China and Russia are bad guys. And some coming in from places that have trouble with terrorism, they're probably here not just to, try to take our jobs and maybe commit awful, heinous murders, but commit mass murder in the form of terrorism. Again, it's the natural and logical consequence of Joe Biden's open borders.
Now, I asked our friend Mike Gallagher, who holds the David Dreyer chair that you once held and is now on the House Intel Committee. He's going to retire. I asked him whether or not the idea of spies coming across the border was far-fetched, and he agreed to ask Wray how many people, Christopher Wray, director of the FBI for the benefit of the Steelers fans, how many people he had working on counterintelligence now, and Wray wouldn't answer him. And I'm worried that we got a lot of FBI agents looking into rad-trad Catholics at Latin Mass and not enough doing counterintelligence. What do you think, Senator Cotton?
Well, yeah, I mean, if you have one, that's too many of them. But yeah, I do believe that the FBI is still focused on chasing ghosts and so-called domestic violent extremists or radical traditional Catholics who are going to Latin Mass or evangelical preachers who are singing hymns outside abortion clinics, as opposed to what the real job is, which should be stopping these cartels that are poisoning our people, conducting counterintelligence against threats like Russia and China and Iran and Cuba, and chasing after serious criminals. The FBI, while it has many fine agents across the country out on the front lines, has badly misplaced priorities and is in need for significantly changed and improved culture, which can only really come with change of leadership.
Now, Senator Cotton, the State of the Union is coming up. Joe Biden is coming. Maybe he'll get through the speech. Maybe he won't. I'm sure he'll rest up for that, and he might. The expectations are so low that if he doesn't fall over, it'll be acclaimed the speech of the century by our left-wing media. The choice of the respondent, who makes that, Senator Cotton? And would you recommend the former president, because he is the presumptive nominee, he will be officially the presumptive nominee after Super Tuesday, but he's going to win Michigan tonight, and he's won, that'll be 4 in a row. Would you let the former president, would you think it would be a good idea for whoever makes that choice to ask the former president to do it?
Well, typically that choice is the Speaker of the House in consultation with the Republican leader in the Senate. Again, I would defer to President Trump on how he wants to run his campaign and what he thinks is the best decision on this or that day for the campaign. I'm not sure that that he would think that about the response to State of the Union. But on your point about Joe Biden's State of the Union, which is going to be given a little bit later than he's normally allowed out in public, I just want to stress that, yes, Joe Biden is old and infirm and not up to doing the job of president. But the main problem with Joe Biden is not that he's old, it's that he's liberal. And Joe Biden could be 20 years younger and sprightly, and the American people would still be struggling to pay grocery bills and rent, and our border would still be open and would still be a laughingstock in the world. So Joe Biden may step over the very low bar set for him in that speech, but it's not going to change his failed presidency at all.
That is absolutely true. But we will, I predict, if he gets through the speech without a magnificent error, the sort of error that you can't forget, they'll proclaim that he's back. Biden is
sure,
back.
And that'll happen again and again this year, Hugh, at the State of the Union, at his convention speech, at the debates, as long as he doesn't freeze up or forget where he is or what day it is.
I had someone tell me over the weekend, after a Joe Biden speech, he acts like a Roomba. I think I was watching a Sean bit, and he wanders around like a Roomba. Did we lose you there, Senator Cotton? You're still there.
No, I'm here, Hugh.
Okay, so my next question has to go to the Ukraine bill in the House. I know you voted against it. Any chance of that coming back with amendments that would incline you to vote for it?
Yeah, I certainly hope so, Hugh. I'd like to see some genuine border reforms on the bill, and I'd like to see a bill that takes out about, I think it was about $19 billion in non-defense aid, to include almost half of that being eligible to go to Gaza, which really means to go to Hamas. So I'd like to address all the priorities the bill began to address and didn't quite do the job for me, which was securing our border and helping our friends in Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan.
So if Johnson and Hakeem Jeffries got together and they added something for Republicans, which would be the rescission you're talking about, and maybe the wall, and something for Democrats, more aid for migrant-impacted cities, do you think that would get through the House and the Senate?
Well, I'm not sure about bailing out sanctuary cities in the bill. We didn't through that in the legislation that was initially proposed. But I do think that if Joe Biden will do what he should have done from October, which is sit down and negotiate with Mike Johnson about a bill that he and the House of Representatives can pass, then certainly it'll pass the Senate.
All right. If he does that, I hope that's what they do. Do you think the government is going to shut down?
Well, I hope it doesn't. There's no reason for it to. I think President Biden and the Democrats haven't yet accepted the reality of divided government. The House passed legislation that reflects the House majority's priorities, and that means the Democrats in the Senate and the White House are going to have to accept some of those priorities. I mean, hell, Chuck Schumer hasn't even accepted some of the priorities of the Senate. You know, the bill that we passed earlier this year to fund the Department of Veterans Affairs had a measure in there to protect veterans' gun rights, and the Democrats are insisting that that be dropped. Well, it passed out of the Democratic Senate. They're demanding that their own bill's provisions be dropped out of the bill. So I think if the White House and the Senate Democrats will accept the reality of divided government, and we should be able to pass 4 funding bills by this Friday, and then hopefully 8 by next Friday.
Last question, Senator Cotton. We've got Joe Biden saying a ceasefire is at hand, but Israeli media says, no, it's not. And Hamas said, no, it's not. What's he doing? I think he's endangering the hostages.
Well, yeah, the only ceasefire Joe Biden is worried about is a ceasefire between himself and his own party's voters in Michigan. That state has a primary today, and Joe Biden is worried about being embarrassed because there's a large Arab American population, a lot of progressives in Detroit and university towns, and there's an effort to not vote for Joe Biden. So all of this, kind of clueless rambling while he's out getting an ice cream cone, making a fool of himself about a ceasefire, is about a ceasefire between him and his own party's voters, because they're not close to a ceasefire in Israel, and the proposals that the Biden administration are making, if you believe the reports, are preposterous, that you'd stop the fighting for weeks, if not months, and basically empty your jails of every Palestinian terrorist in exchange not even all the Israeli terrorists who are held in by Hamas.
I don't know if you listened to the Commentary podcast. Yesterday, John Podhort said the American framework is 4,000 Palestinian prisoners for an Israeli dog. And I mean, it really is bad. It's a terrible framework, but we're not surprised. Senator Tom Cotton, thank you as always. Send Tom Cotton on X.